I'm your host, Christene Marie, and I feel particularly privileged to be here with you tonight, even as I was welcoming you to the Knowing Show. I just felt really, I guess, grateful tonight that I have this show and that those of you who tune in do. And, it's been a number of days, close to probably 190 at this point, that I've been going live since June. And I really love it. It's been truly a privilege, and I've learned so much along the way. I've learned a lot around what not to do, what to do, and even still, there's something about just showing up and being really authentic and showing up with how I am in the moment that I think at the end of the day I really value, and I've experienced a lot of people resonating with that as well, versus having a canned opening and a canned intro and always saying the same thing and having the best hook. And so as we head into 2026, I've been thinking a lot about how I'll curate the show for the next year and what changes I'm going to make. And I'm excited to add more order and structure to it, but I never want to lose the authenticity. I never want to lose the element of us, you and me, showing up as we are right here in this moment. And it's been a really special thing over the last, especially couple of weeks. There's just been a real connection and a real resonance with each one of you. And so I'm very grateful for that. And so I don't want to lose it, even with bringing in the structure, bringing in the order. There's something about the genuine connection that I'm so grateful for. So thank you for joining me here tonight. I want to talk about something that actually I was thinking about as I was getting ready for bed this evening. So, you know how they say shower thoughts are always the most authentic and most genuine. So, as I was brushing my teeth this evening, I had a thought for the topic for tonight that I wanted to discuss with you. And it's really a question that at the end of the day, we've been talking over the last 5 days about particular habits that are encompassing how Jesus, the Christ, manifested in the person of Jesus, how he lived. And there's something about this question that we're going to be addressing tonight that actually bears a lot of weight to these habits that Jesus embodied, that you and I both can tap into and access, should we so choose, that frankly allows for us to really step into our power or pull back from it and frankly live smaller and live. There's a word called it's called obsequious, and it just means that you get a little bit smaller, and it means that you're a little bit more submissive, and you're actually not really living fully and freely and alive. And I lived that way for so much of my life. I lived that way in the environment in which I was raised. I lived that way in my marriage, and I just played it small in so many ways, and it felt safer because it was predictable. But when we step into our power, there's something about that, man, we become alive and we become bigger. Not necessarily that we're louder by any means, but we step into this sense of, I'm actually acting in alignment with who God says that I am, who I want to be, versus who everyone else wants me to be. So now our target of success is no longer the external, but it's something internal. It's like we're self-perpetuated. We're moved from within. There was when I was in high school, I really loved acting, and my high school theater teacher would talk to us about the posture that we should have on stage, and she would say, roll your shoulders back. And when you move forward, pretend that there's like this string at the sternum of your chest and pull it forward, and pretend like you're being literally pulled from your chest. And I think of it that way when we actually are alive, when we're fully awake, when we're activated, man, when we are walking in alignment with who we want to be versus who everyone else says we should be. There is a power and a prowess that comes from that state of being, versus our whole identity being predicated on what we do. Jane, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me on YouTube. I just wanted to say, hey, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. We are talking about whose voice do you listen to? Who do you submit to? Who gets the final say? And that's really actually probably one of the most important questions we could ever ask ourselves, because at the end of the day, there is always somebody at the helm of the ship, so to say. Let's pretend that our life is the sea. We're in a boat, we're moving on the waters, and there's a couple of things in question. Which direction are we headed, and who's the captain? And so then when we really start thinking about the way that we're living our lives, it's really important that we actually ask the question of, okay, am I actually at the helm of the ship? Am I actually the captain of the boat, leading me in the way that I live my life? And am I actually the one who has dictated the direction in which the ship is navigating? Or is it someone else's voice guiding me, leading me in whatever direction? Is my compass pointed north by my own volition, by my own decision, or is my compass pointed east and west because I'm listening to everyone around me? And so this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Just to welcome you all, thank you so much, Kenneth, for joining. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me here on YouTube. I'm so grateful to see you all, and I'm excited for our conversation tonight. Jada, thank you so much for subscribing. I think that this is probably one of the most important questions you and I can ask, especially as we end 2025. I've been spending a decent amount of time thinking about how I lived this year. A friend of mine put together a list of questions, and so I was sitting with these questions last week, and one of those questions that she asked was, in what context, in what scenario were you most alive? When did you feel like you the most? When did you feel most awake and excited and energized? Or when did you actually move out of alignment? When did you start having somebody else be the captain of your ship? When did you take a step back from the wheel and say, okay, somebody else can take the turn to effectively drive the direction for my life? And I have found that I do this actually very often subconsciously. Like, I'm not consciously deciding, oh, I'm going to give someone else permission to drive the ship. But what I do is I do that very subconsciously when I stop paying attention, when I start living on autopilot, when default responses start kicking in, when I start just kind of living on autopilot. And so those are the moments when I don't live intentionally, that someone else is actually the one at the helm, at the wheel of my life. And a lot of times that looks like me living on autopilot from kind of the programs that you and I both inherited in childhood. We saw things modeled for us by our parents. We were taught things in school, whether it was more so from just a practical standpoint, like this is how you behave, this is how you engage with the world, or in a religious setting, being, I don't know about you, but I sat in a pew at church growing up, and I was told things about who God was, and I believed it, and I acted accordingly. And so the question for each one of us when we think about whose voice am I listening to, it's in every single area of our life. It's in the spiritual sense, it's in the financial sense, it's in the professional sense, the personal sense, physical. Whose voice are we listening to when it says how we exercise, how we take care of our bodies, what we eat? And so in this regard of the question, whose voice am I listening to, it actually is really important that we analyze and kind of do an audit in every single area of our life. And it doesn't need to be a deep audit, but it needs to be one where we consider, what is this is a question that I've been asking a few folks, and that I've been asking myself lately. What is my ideal? What's my target that I'm shooting for in each one of these categories? Again, physically, financially, professionally, relationally, spiritually. What is my ideal? What do I actually want when it comes to my relationship with money, when it comes to the amount of money in the bank, when it comes to my relationship with God? And what I've found for myself and for so many other people that I've been talking to is that so often it's not actually our ideal that we're chasing. It's someone else's. It was our parents' ideal that they put forward, that our family rallied around when we were 9, 10 years old. It's maybe something that our boss said is the target that we're chasing in business. And so at the end of the day, man, we're living on someone else's timeline. We're living for someone else's mission. At 26 years old, I had this moment. I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And man, that book woke me up. I realized how much of my life was actually in service to someone else's mission. It was propelling their dream, propelling them to move forward, propelling what they wanted to do. And everything I was doing was oriented towards their goals. And that's not bad. But what I realized is, well, what do I even want? If I was to actually do something that I felt passionate about, what would that even be? And I realized slowly I had no idea. Like, I had no idea what I liked, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to live. And Willie, I just wanted to give you a quick hello on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining tonight. Y'all, this question is so important. Do we even know what we want? And then we break it down into each category of our core areas of life. Do we even know what we want in order to then clarify and crystallize our ideal and our target? And this is what someone told me years ago. If we don't set a new target, we're going to live on autopilot and we're going to naturally repeat history. We've seen this in history, but we haven't really paid attention how, we see, oh my gosh, I'm being my mom. And then we look at our brothers and they're just like our dads. And all of a sudden we start repeating history that was played out before us because that's what we know. We saw it patterned for us, modeled for us, and then we're incredulous to the fact that, man, I am being just like my mom. This is how it was for me when my former husband and I, when he walked out the door, it was like, oh my gosh, I was my mom and he was his dad, and we were both so committed to not being like our parents. And I will say, I have to say, I love my mother so much, and I know he loved I'm sure he still loves his dad, but we wanted something different. And we had a new ideal, but we never crystallized it. We never actually put in real roots in the ground of saying, this is what we're pursuing. And so instead of having a new target that we were chasing, we ended up just doing a full 360 rather than a 180. Because we didn't set the new target, we didn't really know what we were pursuing. And so we ended up just doing a big old circle back to our default, which was us repeating history. So we have to know what our new target is in every single category of life. Otherwise, we're going to always repeat what we know. And so it's really, really important that we take time to do this. So for me, one of the things that I've loved asking myself this year, encouraged by a friend of mine, was looking back just at 2025. When were you and I both most aligned? And then look at it in every single category. Financially, man, when were we really on fire? And if there wasn't a time this year, look back in years prior. I actually found that in 2024, man, I was really, really on my habits. And so because I was on my habits, because every single morning I was being on routine, I was getting aligned, which means bringing my behaviors, my beliefs, my mindsets all into, I guess you could say, obedience to my ideal, because I've set my ideal, I've set my target under who God says that I am. And I bring everything into alignment, into submission under that hierarchy. There's always a hierarchical order. There's in a military, there's going to be the general, and then you've got colonels, and you've got people that fall in rank. And so just like that, we need to identify what's our chief ideal, our general ideal in that regard of okay, I bring everything else into submission under this ideal, but we have to define it. And there's going to be different points in our life where different areas where we've really shown. So in 2024, man, my habits were so strong, and I found that I was actually able to make really strong impact as a result of being strong in my habits, because I was feeding myself personally. So this is where, one of those life focus areas is, how am I doing personally, emotionally? Emotionally, I was doing really, really well because I was tending to myself. I wasn't looking externally. No one else was at the helm of the ship. No one else was at the wheel. I was. And because of that, I had a strength and a firm foundation upon which I was standing that then I could really give to other people. So when I look at that key focus area of my life, which is my emotional state, man, when I look at what was the hallmark, what was a pinnacle, what was a time in life that I was doing really, really well, 2024, from February to June, that time where I was waking up at 4 a.m. every single morning and being so steady in my habits, man, that brought a steadiness in every other area. So, okay, emotionally, that category of my life, My ideal was in 2024 during those months. Okay, got it. What about financially? Well, I go back to 2023 when I set my targets at the beginning of the year of this is how many websites I need to build, how many fractional CMO jobs I need to have, all those little categories of setting goals financially for me, my business to grow. Let me be so specific so that I know when I'm winning and when I'm losing on a financial side. The more clear I was around the financial goals and how I was going to get there, the more I was actually able to, I guess you could say, live in subservience and in obedience to that. And when I say subservience, it's almost like coming into a submissive state. And y'all, that's actually a really big goal for me this upcoming year. It's hard. It's really, really hard. I've had a lot of freedom over the last 3 years, a lot of travel, and it's been so fun. And I feel like I've lived a very wonderful, beautiful life. And I'm realizing as I look in the past, man, there's been so much growth on the heels of habits. And habits for me are most consistent when I'm living in one place, doing the same thing every single day. And so my goal for 2026 is to actually be so predictable and have predictability lead to peace, which leads to partnerships, and that ultimately leads to positioning. And when I say positioning, I mean like literally the ability to have real impact. There's a strong position. It's reliable. It's robust. Willie, I just saw you say here, passion, mission, habits, all in action with intention. Intention, y'all. Willie. I'm so glad that you said this word, intention, because I was diving into this word probably a month ago, intention, and I sent an email out to my newsletter list. The concept of intuition or intention, I'm sorry, when you really dive into that word, intention is something that actually involves every single part of us. It's our mental faculty, it's our emotional faculty, it's spiritual, it's our physical body, it's every part of us. We activate and bring into, it's like the embodiment of alignment is intentionality. But it's not just, we can't just be intentional mentally, we can't just be intentional emotionally. It's every part of us actually needs to be in agreement that we are going to pursue this one thing, and then we move forward. It's like when, again, to use that military analogy, if a general gives a command, everyone says, okay, we're going in that direction. People don't question it. They don't slap back or clap back and say, I'm not going to do that. People aren't sitting on their laurels. They are ready to go at the behest of the general. And so, are we the general? Are we the one calling the shots in our lives? And here's the comforting thing. We're not doing it alone. It's not you and I operating blindly. We've got a lot of support. Well, we've got every single one of our intelligences with data. And let me unpack that. So we've got our intellectual intelligence, our IQ, which has been trained since we were in 4 or 5 years old. Our IQ has been established and cultivated since school. And then we've got our emotional intelligence, which has data about the past. It's learned things. It's learned things about people. It's learned things about places. It stores it in our physical body and alerts us when we're heading into danger. So we've got the EQ, the emotional intelligence. We've got the IQ, the intellectual intelligence. We've got artificial intelligence. This is insane. We are entering an age and an era where we've never had more support than ever before. Where, man, if we want to pursue something, we have all these little bots here to serve us, to support our mission and what we're moving forward to do. And we've also got our spiritual intelligence. We've got a direct access, a direct pathway to God. We are never alone. We constantly have support. We constantly have someone in our corner at all times, where if we don't know, we always have someone we can turn to. And so back to the last 5 days that we had leading up to Christmas around the 5 habits of Christ here that we've had on the Knowing Show. The very first day, Sunday, this week, we talked about the core habit of Christ was that every single morning he would pull aside and spend time with his Father alone. And y'all, this is probably the most important thing. And even this morning when I was doing my vertical alignment, which is my time to make sure I'm the one at the helm of the ship, I'm the one who's the voice of the general, not other people. And man, that this time is so important. I was reminded this morning, I was in prayer and I just felt like God really encouraged me and reminded me, y'all, we have to take this time in the morning or whenever you choose to do it and view it as really a holy time. It's really this beautiful and sacred opportunity. Proverbs 1, that's where I felt led to read this morning. And I felt like God reminded me the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear, so I looked into that word fear. I'm like, okay, what does fear really mean? And and that word fear, the Greek root of that word means yes, to be struck and be terrified, but it also means to be in awe, to be in reverence. So the question is, who and where have we placed our reverence? Are we revering man? Are we revering God? Who ultimately are we revering that then allows us to call the shots? Y'all, this is a really, really important question. Whose voice, is the one in the driver's seat? And the thing is that yes, if it's our voice, if we're the ones at the wheel, good, and who who's in our board of directors? Who's in our ear whispering? It's like remember in the animated movies, we've got the little devil on one side and the little angel on one side. Whose voice are we listening to? So, one, we have to be in the driver's seat, but then who's our counsel? Who's our advisors? Who's the board of advisors? Who are we listening to? Willie, I just saw you ask this question on Instagram. You said, I have a question. You just shared how much you enjoyed your travel and experiences of the last 2 years, and you mentioned being predictable in 2026. Does your predictable routine in 2026 include travel? Willie, I love that you asked that. I do have some travel plans. I actually am planning to relocate for a time to Arizona for about 5 months, and I plan to really be strong there. Like I don't plan to leave aside from a mastermind that I'm a part of. A mastermind is effectively a group of professionals get together and it's centered around a common theme or a general topic. And so this one is more so around marketing and integrating artificial intelligence in the marketing field. And I have a marketing business. But aside from that, I plan to be in Arizona for about 4 or 5 months. And then I don't know after that. I will say last year I was in Paris and France for 6 weeks. And then no, I'm sorry. Yeah, Paris, France for 6 weeks. And in addition to that, I went to Italy. So for 6 weeks I traveled between Paris, France, and Italy and multiple places within Italy. I went to Croatia as well during that 6 week time. And then I went to a couple different countries on a cruise with my parents. And then Man, I'm trying to remember where else I went. I went to Canada for a couple weeks. So I would anticipate I'll go back to Canada at some point this upcoming year, but I don't intend to be as busy as I have been. Because really the predictability piece, this is really where I feel like it's so important for me. And this is just where I am right now. And I actually am planning to take it quarter by quarter rather than kind of making uh, I guess you could say widespread statement for the entire 365 days of 2026. I'm really planning to lean in to the predictability, to establish new habits for myself. Because man, I served as fractional chief marketing officer along with my team for a company where it really like absorbed all of our focus. And we moved away from that client last year. And I found myself, man, just really in creation mode. And so now it's like, okay, let me step back into discipline and have my creation be harnessed and almost like leveraged by discipline. So I've got a really strong foundation that I'm standing on and also boundaries of discipline to house creation so that I continue to create and continue to build, but it's within a system. Yeah, dedicated focus. That's exactly what it feels like. So one thing around focus and around predictability that I'm thinking about is that peace does not mean that it's boring. peace actually can be exactly what I make it and what I make it to look like, as long as it's a heart posture. And so I have to remember that, because at one point I started feeling a little bit trapped before I even started being predictable and disciplined. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing the freedom. And that's part of the reason why a lot of us seek entrepreneurship, is because we want freedom and flexibility and life and breath to just do what we feel called to and what we want to do. And there's just a real desire for that. And so as I made peace a real aim for this year, I had to remind myself that peace externally can look however I want it to look like. Peace is really an internal pursuit. So that was important for me to realize. And frankly, realizing that I can still have freedom while pursuing an internal state of peace was really helpful. Um, my favorite memories this year, I just saw your question. Man, I have to tell you, I loved being with my parents. Y'all, I don't know if you all have a close relationship with your parents, but 3 years ago, I just had this moment where just for context, in 2014, my brother-in-law was killed, and he had a 3-week-old baby girl. My sister was 26 years old, and it was so incredibly devastating. And then 8.5 years after that, my husband left. So it was like, man, my family just lost 2 incredible men. Um, and it was just so sad. And 3 years ago, I just had this moment where I realized that I don't know how long I have my parents for. I don't know how long I have my dad. I don't know how long I have my mom, and I just want to invest in that relationship so much. And so it was literally 7 days until they and my 2 younger sisters were boarding a plane to Rome, and then boarding a boat to take a 12-day cruise. And 7 days from then, I just literally bought a ticket and flew to Rome the next week with them, because I realized, I was like, man, if I don't do this, I'm always going to regret it. And so I think that in terms of my favorite memories from this past year, that was it was so life-giving. And y'all, that's a really important thing. So when I think about these life categories and these life focus areas, we're talking about, yes, financial, yes, professional, yes, personal, physical, but what about relational? What kind of a life do I want to build? And y'all, when we think about this, why are we asking these questions? Why are we analyzing these life categories and these life focuses for us? It's because of legacy, because our legacy is built every single moment, every single decision we make. We are building a legacy. And so when it comes to how do I want to live 2026, man, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind me? And legacy, it's not just financial, it's relational. It's experiential. Experiential for me, relational in regards to every single person that I have. So with my parents, what kind of eulogy would I want my dad to say about me if I was to die tomorrow? What would I want my mom to say? What would I want my sister to say? My brother? And all of a sudden, every decision I make, every single moment, every Christmas, every holiday becomes that much more meaningful. And so, as I look back on this year, my favorite memory, it really was being with my parents and my 2 younger sisters on this sailing trip. And it was so meaningful, but honestly, it was only because I sat and thought about what would I want my dad to say about me at my funeral? The next week I was flying to Rome to be with him for this cruise. And so it's really important that we take stock of, what do I want? Not just relationally, how do I want to show up in relationships, but what do I want in every single relationship? And so this conversation of, man, what kind of life do I want to live? It takes time. It really takes time to get so laser focused. And Willie, you said this. You said here, what does it say? Dedicated focus. And I love how you said this right here on Instagram, creating peace in daily routine while delivering your mission. Oh, I love that. Y'all, that's so good. And so it's really a question of, how do we want to live every single day? How do we want to show up? What do we want our relationships with other people to look like? What do we want our bank accounts to look like? How do we want to spend our time? Because this is what I realized. I wrote my eulogy when I was 30 years old. I turned 30, and I wrote it. And what I realized was that I actually was saying things um, that I thought I believed, but I wasn't living my life according to that. So one of those things, and Willie, you brought this up on Instagram, was travel. I wrote in my eulogy a couple years ago when I turned 30 that I wanted to be very well cultured, but I wasn't living that way. I actually wasn't traveling for the purpose of being cultured. I was traveling for speaking engagements or networking, and I wasn't actually investing in the environment that I was visiting. And so in that realization, I either had to come to grips that I need to change the way I'm speaking or I need to change the way that I'm living because my beliefs and my behaviors are not aligning right now. And so, as I realized that, I ended up changing my behavior and I ended up traveling with intention. I went to the UK for 5 weeks, and my sisters came with me in 2023. And then I visited a bunch of other places and Italy and Greece, and it's just been so fun since. And now, as I'm looking at my eulogy again, I'm realizing, okay, I did the travel piece. Cool. I am in a good place there. I'm living in accordance with how I want to end my life. But there's a lot of other ways. Now let me focus in these other regards and other directions. Here's something that and I think this is actually really, really important. About 4 years ago, I realized that I was so blind to myself on an emotional level. I had never dove into my emotions. I had never honored emotions. I had always viewed emotions as weakness. And so for the last 4 years, I've really been cultivating an awareness. Emotional intelligence has two different definitions or two different parts of the definition of emotional intelligence. The first part is to become aware of, be able to express and convey and be in control of one's emotions. And then the second part of it is the ability to handle interpersonal relationships with empathy and with wisdom. But that first part of emotionally intelligent, I just, in both regards, I was so blind. I didn't know how I felt. I didn't know what was going on inside of me. I really thought that any emotion that came up for me was fundamentally a sign of weakness. And so over the last 4 years, I've really been cultivating that ability to to understand what's going on. And y'all, isn't that just that's like that's such a privilege, to actually know who we are. There's I think it was Socrates that said, maybe not, I don't know, but he said, "Know thyself." And there's something around that that's like the greatest privilege of being alive, that we actually get the opportunity to know who created us, the creator, and us ourselves, the created. And in knowing the created, we get to also know the creator all that much more. And so that's just like the greatest privilege of a lifetime. And so over the last 4 years, I've really been studying this. But when we think about, okay, I've gotten really comfortable in this area, in this topic, in this vertical. So when we think about our life focus areas, which ones are underdeveloped? So emotionally, I was underdeveloped. Over the last couple of years, I've been focusing on that. Okay, now what are the other areas that are underdeveloped that I need to focus on this year? Well, this year, I really need to focus on discipline. And that's something that I'm already like, oh gosh, that's going to be hard. And I know I need that. I know I need that because when I look back at my life, the times I've been most impactful for myself and for other people is when I've been so on my habits, so in routine, so in alignment with who I want to be and how I want to live. Um, so y'all, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm gonna go ahead and jump off tonight. I know it's late, but Willie, thank you so much for joining tonight. I love what you said here. As you speak, so it shall be. It is so incredibly true. Just one last thing here. For those of you on YouTube, thank you so much for joining tonight. Devin, I'm really grateful for you guys. I want to share one thing that as I wrote my eulogy when I turned 30, I ended up reading that on a daily basis for about a year. And it was so helpful to remind me who I want to be. It was so helpful to bring me back into focus of, okay, this is how I want to live, who I want to be, who God says that I am. And that brings the stability and rootedness in truth when we hear all the voices around us, when all these other voices are vying for the wheel of our lives and vying to be at the helm of the ship, we get to say, no, I know who I am and whose I am. And in that, there is a security and a confidence that allows for us to keep building and keep going when it's like the going gets so incredibly tough. So, Garcia, thank you so much for joining tonight. Dan, um, metal shredder, thank you for joining tonight. Y'all, I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I will see you all tomorrow.